Hello, and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview. This is a show where we take a look at what's coming to the current edition of the North Coast Journal. I am your host, Tanya Shrum. We are joined, as usual, by the North Coast Journal's news editor, Thad Greenson, and arts and features editor, Jennifer Fumiko Cahill. Welcome to you both. I hope you're enjoying this very rainy Wednesday afternoon.
Loving the rain.
Loving the rain. Makes for going home and curling up with a good book every night.
It is soup weather for sure.
Soup. Yes. Yes, you are speaking my language. Well, Thad, can you tell us what's coming to this week's North Coast Journal cover?
Yeah, so this week we have what is an annual feature in the journal. It is a deviation from what we normally do. We're normally, really put a premium on being kind of locally focused. And if it's not happening, within the confines of Humboldt County or narrowly outside of it, we're not interested. But this is, as I said, the exception. So this week we have a story that is the top 10 Project Censored's top 10 stories of the year. And so this is a project that's put on by Random Lengths News, which is another member of the alternative Association of News Media. And it really kind of fits into our core mission as an alt weekly, which is really trying to find undercovered aspects of news, especially in our community in Humboldt County, but then beyond. And so Random Lengths News does this every year, and they take what's an annual book by Andy Lee Roth and Steve Masick, that looks at the national newscape and really the global newscape and tries to figure out kind of what are the most undercovered or underreported stories every year. So what are the stories that are really hugely important, but just not getting much traction or attention in quote unquote corporate media or quote unquote mainstream media. And then they put together this book, which kind of dives into great detail on all these different stories. And then the folks at Random Lengths News take that book and kind of come up with a shorter, still fairly lengthy list, and which then gets distributed to members of ANN, the Alternative Weekly Association, and of which we are one. And for the last, I don't know if we've done it every year we've been here, Jen, but we've done it for the last handful for sure.
Yeah, we have.
And I think it's a really good kind of comprehensive look at problems with our national media landscape and complex problems that really deserve a lot of scrutiny because they impact everyday lives and just don't get it on a consistent basis.
Definitely some important highlights of underreported topics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they all always fall into a pattern, and and frankly, that pattern generally kind of falls within corporate greed and a lack of regulation and oversight. And so this year's list is certainly no different. And I guess environmental degradation is also very much a prevalent theme. Kind of goes with that corporate greed piece. But so this year, the top story is looking at a study that found that basically the forever chemicals, or PFSAs as they're commonly known, have become so pervasive across the planet that they are now in unsafe levels to drink in rainwater found all over the earth. And so they're kind of saying that we put this premium focus, as we should, on climate change, but there's kind of all kinds of ways that we are making this world uninhabitable as a global species. And so one of the issues, and this ties into other stories on the list, is that it's not so much that the prevalence of these chemicals has increased hugely over the last handful of years. It's that our understanding of what these chemicals do to human bodies has changed markedly. And so these chemicals have been linked to, everything from decreased fertility and and a variety of cancers to child development issues and stuff like that. So really wide-ranging impacts. And it's one of these things that was kind of allowed to continue to be used because we didn't know that much about them. And as science has kind of caught up with industry, we have decided, oh, these are not necessarily acceptable or healthy to have out in the environment, and it's kind of too late to unring that bell. And so that kind of leads directly into another story on the list, which is that just how ill-equipped and inefficient our government is in kind of regulating toxic chemicals. And one of the primary ones that the list looks at is the regulation of asbestos. And so the EPA 30 years ago tried to outlaw asbestos, and it is still legal to sell in the United States, to use in the United States. It is known to be so toxic that there's I don't even know, for homeowners out there, you have to sign like a 12-page asbestos, declaration when you buy or sell a home, saying, detailing whether there's known asbestos in the residence. We all know about how difficult asbestos abatement is. I mean, this is a substance that everybody knows to be toxic, and everybody, knows that you don't want anywhere around you. Yet the EPA has been unable to ban it. And part of that, as the list goes on to in another story, is that, the EPA takes what's called a risk-based approach to chemicals. And so basically, to effectively regulate or constrain the use of a chemical, the EPA has to prove that it's harmful. So kind of going back to those forever chemicals before, it's not as though a company comes up with something that's, hasn't been seen before, and they're like, well, we should, the regulators are effectively like, we should wait and test this for a long time before we determine whether it's safe to put out there. It's instead on the government to prove that it's unsafe, which generally takes, in the case of asbestos, a 30-plus year track record of showing that it is toxic. So I'll bring this around to the last item on the list, which is, kind of seems like an outlier on the surface, but it kind of goes hand in glove with the others, which is the rate at which corporate profits in the United States have just exploded. And so the list kind of follows two tracks on this. One is just looking at the earnings of the top 0.1% compared to the lower 90%. And so over the last approximately 40 years, the 0.1% of us, and we're not even talking about the 1%ers, we're talking about the 0.1%ers, their wage generation has increased 465%. The bottom 90%, it's increased 29%. So 29% is not even keeping up with inflation and the cost of living over the last 40 years. Obviously, 465% is a significant jump. The other thing I will say is I think the list does a really good job of linking some of these corporate earnings, to this concept of inflation. Everybody, you can't watch a presidential debate. You can't, pay attention to mainstream news outlets without all of this hyperbolic talk about inflation. And it's true. Prices are absolutely going up. And it's true that there were some very real things that caused initially inflation to begin, including, supply chain issues with the pandemic, real constraints, and real supply and demand imbalances in some cases. But what the list has shown pretty, or what research has shown pretty extensively, is that corporate profits have skyrocketed over this. And so because people are, talking about inflation, and it has become a thing that we've all just accepted as real, companies have taken that as an excuse to be like, well, we can, consumers are expecting it, so raise prices, which in turn leads to raise profits. So just as an example of that, oil companies from 2021 to 2022, profits rose 235% or $52 billion. So sometimes we whine about gas prices going up as if it's inevitable or it's something our government is or isn't doing effectively. In fact, it is companies seizing on our need or our desire to drive and wreaking enormous profits from it.
Well, Thad, I really appreciate that. And do you have any final thoughts? I wanted to give you just a little bit of time to touch on the local story before we pivot.
Yeah, I think I really encourage everybody to read the list. It's kind of a dense read in certain ways, but I think it does really both explore some real issues and real problems in our world, but then also really shows how ineffective, kind of our media ecoscape is in covering those things effectively. Um, and the last thing I would say is just, in the mid this conversation about corporate profits, environmental degradation, the need for increased regulation here on the North Coast, we're at this pivot point where we're contemplating offshore wind. We are, multinational corporations are looking at Humboldt County as a place to do business. And so these things, might seem kind of far off or hypothetical in a certain way, but they very much may not as we navigate kind of this new place we found ourselves in.
And it also calls for the need to always stay in touch with the non-corporate journalism to get more in-depth reporting.
Absolutely. Stay informed.
So real quick, before we pivot to Jennifer for her stories, can we just touch on that local story that is a recap from a previous journal story?
Yeah, definitely. We've been reporting for some time now, I guess for a year plus now, about the Humboldt County Fair Association's the embezzlement case that impacted it. So its former bookkeeper has been accused of embezzling hundreds of thousands of dollars from the organization, was just charged back in October but federally. With some counts of 5 counts of wire fraud, and we've been kind of trying to figure out what was going on with the case, and there was very little public information. And what we found out is it turns out that Nina Taffarella, the former bookkeeper who's been accused, missed her first court date. A federal warrant was issued for her arrest, and she was taken into custody on LA County, booked on the charges, and is actually supposed to appear in San Francisco, federal court in San Francisco today to make her kind of initial formal appearance and probably enter a plea and get a public defender. But that case is moving forward. So that's the update we have in this week's paper.
Well, thank you for that story. I encourage everybody to pick up this week and every week's journal and read it cover to cover. I definitely think the wrap up was important, and I learned things that I wish I didn't need to learn about fracking and numerous things. So definitely pick up the journal and read it for yourself. So thank you. And now we're going to turn to Jennifer and talk about her wonderful story that kind of ties in a little bit to the corporate greed and the environment moving forward.
I did a story this week, a satirical column that is titled "We Need to Stop AI Before It Replaces Tech CEOs Like Me." I have been watching more, I am by no means a person who's got a really strong handle on science. It's just true, and I can accept that limitation. But I have been watching experts and journalists and people talking about AI and, the sort of benefits and dangers of AI. As a former college instructor, I see the problems. But at the same time, in looking at those discussions from people who are really, really informed and have a real grasp on the technology and, social issues that are tied to that technology, then there are tech CEOs, which the conversations that I've seen around this have been nuts. I don't know if you saw it or if you are living a better life than me. A couple weeks ago, Elon Musk was on his platform talking about a trolley problem. One of those ethical problems where it's like which track do you run over people on? Like how do you do the least harm? And they were concerned that it was that it was not racist enough. Or that's how it came off to me. The things that I see people worrying about in the world of, what I see as a bunch of really living in their own world CEO billionaires are not the same things that you and I are worried about. So in this piece, it is a tech CEO, and I researched lots of goofy stuff about tech CEOs and their weird habits. And, like we're all weird, we're all freaks. But then once you get, as Thad pointed out to me, like, 10 zeros behind your name or whatever, and, once you've been declared a genius, suddenly all of that stuff is just part of what makes you interesting and nobody checks you on it. So if you like stop bathing or whatever, people just roll with it. And I found lots of, for one thing, disturbing things that people said in regard to AI, like the excitement over getting rid of artists. Essentially, the excitement, I get it. Everybody did their little like Facebook profiles with these like beautiful elfin airbrushed images of themselves looking 25 pounds thinner. But we also have artists that can do that. And I remember when like robotics was a big discussion in kind of the community square, and there was concern over like, well, what is going to happen to workers? I thought that like robots were going to do dangerous labor. Like I'm very happy with the bomb squad work they're up to, but I don't know that we need them to make art and music. I don't know that I need AI to replace writers and musicians and artists and fashion designers and things that are about human imagination. I don't know that I need to see all the cheesy airbrush art that they produce. I'm a little bit over it. But the excitement with which, billionaires talk about getting rid of workers, employable people, and their weird kind of selfish journey for more power and more tech and more kind of invasive tech, scraping your information, everything just struck me as wild. The things that make them hesitate are not the things that make us, the average person, hesitate about AI. Also, I learned some very disturbing things about the health habits of a lot of tech CEOs, between the weird diets and I don't know if you've heard about this guy who is like swapping out his 17-year-old son's blood.
I loved that line. I guffawed. I absolutely.
I just don't know that somebody who is swapping out his child's blood is the person to be maybe making choices about our future with AI. I don't know if we should be looking to the guy who's planning to leave our planet for Mars as the person who decides about AI.
I think it was a beautiful satirical piece, and I think that you put so much backstory into it to make it a believable satirical piece.
I'm a mean woman, Tanya.
It was wonderful. It was a joy.
Actual joy can be had actually in our Get Out column, by the way. In case you are done with digital life, and I encourage you to go outside and touch grass. I touch it and then I go back inside. We have another wonderful story from Sarah Hobart this week about birding. And of course, while she's talking in general about birding and kind of like, if you want to get into birding, what do you really need? Like, do you really need schmancy binoculars? Do you need to learn bird calls? Like, how much of a learning curve is there getting into birding, et cetera? And she has some really good, solid advice, including boots. Good boots for standing in cow poop, non-negotiable. You need those. But she also did for us a little tiny box on the bird that everyone is talking about. I don't know if you've heard about this in your corner, but the purple gallinule, am I saying that right? Gallinule?
I am not sure if you're saying it right, but I know that it is a beautiful bird, and I went looking the other day. So no, I didn't.
Okay,
but
so Holly,
I get out the door late in the day, so.
So Holly, our production manager, is a little bit of a birder. She's got a little birder in her. And she actually went to the march on Friday to see this bird. And she said all she had to do was follow the crowd And there are all these birders. You just see everyone's backs looking up. And the bird just like hangs out there and does not feel weird about this, I guess. But it is supposed to be, the purple gallinule is a Florida native. And it could have gone off course. Who knows what birds
Maybe
do.
it preferred California. Take that, Ron DeSantis.
Listen, I want to point out that this is a very rainbow bird.
It's beautiful.
If I were this bird, my tail feathers would be over in California.
And perhaps that's why it likes the crowd. It's geared up for the adoration.
So according to Sarah, who I love that she described it as having a candy corn beak, because it really does look like somebody just smacked a piece of candy corn onto this animal. It's like blue and purple and green and like truly rainbow. It's got like a little red eye. It's got the legs yellow, I think. It's wild looking. And it really stands out. I think that's one of the things that people are enjoying, is that you go and you know you saw that thing. She was saying that it is eating frogs and snails. That's, I guess, what it eats, and we have those. And it's been here since the day after Thanksgiving, and everybody's been going to see it. I hope you get to see it. I hope you go back and see it. I kind of think it's like, this is the kind of thing that, you know, is for a non-birder person. Like, you know, I'm looking at two grayish birds and I'm like, I don't know what I'm looking at. But this is like she sent a wonderful crisp image so that you can go down and you can identify this thing when you get down there. But it's kind of neat to think that everybody shows up and it becomes this like little social occasion, right? And everybody's talking about the bird. And I got a couple of different emails from people like, hey, have you seen the bird? Like, have you got anybody going to take pictures of the bird? And
Jennifer, the bird is the word.
It is. It is. And I just she refers to it as being a gasp out loud stunner of a bird.
I definitely will have to endeavor to get out there earlier in the day on the weekend, because when I heard about it, I went out there. It was just a little too dusky, and I was unsuccessful. So, but I love that the story lets you off the hook, how you can get into this without feeling intimidated by the other plumage of more experienced birders.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to you don't even have to, as she put it, you don't even have to take photos. You don't have to be that birder. You don't have to have a big life list. But, you know, I had asked, you know, we're not sure how long, like when we get rare birds, or rare for here, when they come over, you know, people go and see them. Like there was an owl a couple years ago that everybody went to see. Was it a barred owl? Was that barred owl? Something like that.
I think it was barred, yeah.
Anyway, people went to see an owl. I was saying like, okay, can this bird like live here? Like, what are the chances? Like, it's a Floridian bird. Can it just like stay here? Has global warming taken us to this place? And Holly, our production manager, mentioned, she was like, well, it would be great if it could find a mate. If there was another one with it, then there's a chance that it might decide to stay here or something. And I was like, wow, this is just like how we trap people in Humboldt. You know, they come, they do a weekend here, they do some hiking, but we haven't really gotten them to stay until they meet somebody who's like a hardcore kayaker or something, and then they're trapped. Then we have them.
Luckily, Humboldt trapped me the first time I walked among the trees, so it didn't.
That's how they got you.
That is how I was snagged.
It got me with a spouse.
It did.
Yes, I am like this bird. I shouldn't even be here.
We all belong here, and we create our own beauty and plumage for others to observe and admire. So with that, I will let us know that we're wrapping up for this week, and the current edition of the North Coast Journal is available on newsstands now. Pick up yours today, and of course, you can find it online at northcoastjournal.com. I am Tanya Schrum. Thanks for being with us. and staying informed and supportive of our North Coast community. Go see the bird. Have a great week.
Thank you.